Imagine yourself walking through the fog-shrouded streets of San Francisco in the 1930s, the wind carrying the distant toll of a cable car bell, and the Golden Gate shimmering in the background like a promise of future stories to unfold. Nestled in a modest home near Golden Gate Park was a newborn who would one day become a staple face on American television, a figure who symbolized warmth, resilience, and the unique power of classic TV to bring entire families together in front of a glowing screen. That newborn arrived on January 22, 1934, and he bore the formidable name Wilfred Bailey Everett Bixby III, a mouthful for any infant, but soon shortened to the more familiar, easygoing Bill Bixby. Over time, that name would grace credits in beloved sitcoms, heart-wrenching dramas, and of course in the unforgettable role of a mild-mannered scientist with a very green alter ego. From the very start, Bill Bixby seemed poised between two worlds. He was a sixth-generation Californian of English descent, raised by a father who worked as a store clerk and a mother who managed a department store. Wilfred Everett Bixby II and Jane McFarland Bixby weren't in show business, so they must have been slightly perplexed at their little boy's precocious flair for performance. But Bill's lineage wasn't purely about stable day jobs. It also carried an independent, pioneering spirit that had drawn his ancestors to California generations before. Childhood in the Bay Area was a kaleidoscope of colors, rolling fog, occasional damp drizzle, and the towering structure of the Golden Gate Bridge that never ceased to inspire. Bill would often roam the pathways of Golden Gate Park as a boy, an only child who found his amusements in daydreams and elaborate make-believe games. He'd ride his bicycle down winding lanes, weaving together stories in his imagination as if he were already rehearsing for some grand stage. But the comfort of a stable two-parent household didn't last forever. When Bill hit his teenage years, his parents divorced, setting off a wave of emotional turmoil that forged a deeper bond between Bill and his mother. Jane was the one who truly recognized Bill's interest in performance and found ways to nurture it. She supported him when he discovered drama at Lowell High School, a place where his spirited personality and quick wit started to shine. Picture a teenage Bill in a crowded auditorium stepping onto the stage for a school production. As soon as he delivered his first line, you might imagine teachers and classmates exchanging glances. There was something about him that was magnetic. Not just your average high school performer, Bill also joined the Forensic Society, winning debate awards and embracing the thrill of spirited argument. That sense of showmanship in debate was only a taste of what he'd bring to comedic and dramatic roles down the line. After graduating, Bill Bixby made moves that seemed standard for a bright, if slightly wayward youth. He enrolled in San Francisco City College, then later at UC Berkeley in 1952. But the academic path never quite sat comfortably with him. He would joke in later interviews that, while he was a lousy student, he was undoubtedly a great dreamer. His time in college was cut short by the draft. With the Korean War ongoing, Bill answered the call to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps. Yet, in an odd stroke of fate, he never saw combat. He was stationed stateside at Camp Pendleton, serving as a private first class and taking on logistical duties. It was an experience that taught him discipline, but also reinforced that his real ambitions lay in captivating audiences, not in military formations. Upon his discharge, he found himself wandering across various jobs. He was a bellhop, then a pool lifeguard, and eventually found work in an auto plant in Detroit. It was a long, winding route, but that path eventually led him to modeling gigs. There's something cinematic about a handsome young Marine-turned-auto worker from California being discovered for his good looks, eventually hailed as the face of Chrysler in a Detroit Free Press ad. Little did anyone know that the face in that ad would soon become a fixture on television screens across America. That flash of recognition as a model was Bill's cue to pack his bags and relocate to Los Angeles, the fabled city of angels, in 1959. He arrived with no illusions. He knew stardom wasn't guaranteed, but the bright lights of Hollywood offered more possibilities than another shift at a Ford plant. If you visualize him stepping off a bus or out of a modest car, suitcase in hand, wearing that confident but friendly grin, you can almost hear the film score swell. In Tinseltown, the scramble began. Bill went to audition after audition, meeting with casting directors who saw dozens of hungry faces a day. In 1960, he landed a small role on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, a comedic show focusing on teenage misadventures. It was hardly a starring performance, more like a tiny blinking light in the vast panorama of television. But it was enough for Bill. It was a foot in the door, a chance to prove he had comedic chops and that intangible star quality that left people wanting more. From there, his early career consisted of sporadic minor film parts. He made brief appearances in Lonely Are the Brave, 1962, and snagged one-off roles on shows like The Joey Bishop Show, 1962, and Dr. Kildare, 1963. He learned quickly that building a Hollywood career often starts with background roles, cameo appearances, and fleeting guest spots. But Bill was about to catch his first big break. In 1963, My Favorite Martian came calling, and Bill was cast as Tim O'Hara, a down-to-earth reporter who becomes the companion and covert keeper of a Martian named Uncle Martin, played by Ray Walston. The premise was zany and improbable. A Martian crash lands, takes up residence in Tim's home, and tries to hide his identity. But it worked, not least because Bill played the perfect straight man to Walston's comical alien shenanigans. There was a real sincerity in Bill's comedic timing, an ability to react with just the right blend of exasperation and warmth that anchored the show. It became a hit series, and with it, Bill Bixby found himself in the spotlight. During the run of My Favorite Martian, 1963 to 1966, Bill and Ray Walston developed a friendship that transcended the set. It wasn't all just scripted banter. Off-screen, they'd challenge each other to chess matches, apparently with Bill losing most of the time to the sly Walston, who had a few years and quite a bit of cunning on him. These behind-the-scenes tidbits painted Bill as a man who took genuine pleasure in the collaborative nature of television. If you were part of the cast or crew, you weren't just a co-worker. You were a collaborator in the craft of making people laugh. By the time My Favorite Martian ended, Bill had proven his comedic talents, and audiences had grown used to that likable, witty persona. The show's success opened doors to more opportunities that would let him explore different facets of his range. Come 1969, Bill struck gold again with The Courtship of Eddie's Father. This time, he stepped into the shoes of Tom Corbett, a widower raising a young son named Eddie, played by Brandon Cruz. The series found an immediate audience, mainly because it was far more than a standard sitcom. It was a heartwarming, emotionally intimate portrayal of a father-son relationship. Each episode balanced comedic setups with gentle moral lessons, and Bill, perhaps channeling some of the heartbreak of his own family struggles, brought a genuine paternal warmth to the role. He gave Brandon Cruz fatherly advice off-screen, teaching him everyday skills like riding a bike. The show's theme song, Best Friend, became a nostalgic anthem for families gathered around their TV sets. Watching it now, one can still feel the sincerity in Bill's performance. He was portraying a loving father on camera, But he was also building a real-life bond with Brandon, who would later recall Bill's kindness and mentorship as one of the greatest gifts of his early career. In 1973, Bill tried something new, the magician. As Anthony Blake, Bill played a master illusionist who dabbles in crime solving. The concept was unusual, sort of a detective show where illusions and sleight of hand propelled the drama. It showcased Bill's ability to pivot from comedic roles to something more intense and action-oriented. While the show only lasted one season, it expanded Bill's repertoire. He got to do some real magic tricks, delighting audiences, and demonstrating an on-screen flair for the dramatic that was worlds away from Tim O'Hara or Tom Corbett. Around the mid-1970s, he also began dipping his toes into directing. He worked on episodes of Rich Man, Poor Man, Book 2, among other projects. This behind-the-camera curiosity was something Bill would cultivate over the next decade. He relished the idea of guiding a show's overall vision, supporting actors, and making creative decisions at a macro level. Directing allowed him to shape stories in a different way than acting alone, and it would become an essential part of his identity later on. While his career soared through the 1970s, Bill's personal life grew complicated. In 1971, he married actress Brenda Benet. They seemed like a glamorous couple, and soon they welcomed a son, Christopher, in 1974. For Bill, fatherhood must have felt like a real-life extension of the paternal role he played on the courtship of Eddie's father. However, the happiness didn't hold. He and Brenda began drifting apart, culminating in a divorce in 1980. It's an unfortunate reality for many in Hollywood. Long shoots, the demands of publicity, the constant swirl of attention can strain even the strongest relationships. Yet nothing could compare to the devastating blow Bill was about to experience. In March 1981, Christopher, just 6 years old, died from a rare throat infection called epiglottitis during a ski trip in Mammoth Lakes, California. Bill had rushed him to the hospital, desperate to get immediate care. Tragically, there were delays in treatment, and Christopher didn't survive. In interviews, Bill's voice would shake with anger as he recalled doctors seeming slow to act, an agonizing memory that would forever haunt him. If that heartbreak weren't enough, Brenda sank into a deep depression, blaming herself and unable to cope with the loss. Just a year later, in April 1982, she took her own life with a gun in the very home she had once shared with Bill. In a cruel twist of fate, it was Bill who discovered her body. For a man known for his sunny disposition on camera, these twin losses were shattering. Friends worried that Bill might never recover emotionally, but in public, he tried to maintain composure. He poured his grief into his work, though privately he battled anger, guilt, and profound sadness. Yet even as he mourned, Hollywood had a new role for him, arguably the defining one of his entire career. In 1978, Bill was cast as Dr. David Banner in The Incredible Hulk, a CBS series based on the iconic Marvel character. While the show had launched before Christopher's death, it would continue through 1982 and well into subsequent Hulk TV movies. The premise was pure comic book fantasy, a scientist who transforms into a raging green monster, played by Lou Ferrigno, whenever he becomes angry. But Bill insisted on grounding the show in genuine emotion, focusing on Banner's tragic quest to rid himself of his monstrous affliction. The line, "You wouldn't like me when I'm angry," became an instant pop culture staple. People often credit Bill's performance as adding a sense of real empathy and sorrow to what might otherwise have been just another superhero show. He built Banner as a quiet, desperate man running from place to place, trying to suppress his own demons. Audiences tuned in not just for the Hulk-smashing action, but to watch Bill's soulful portrayal of a man forever haunted by his transformation. Behind the scenes, Bill also flexed his directing muscles. He directed several episodes such as Homecoming, 1979, where Banner returns to his childhood home. Like many of his directorial efforts, he coaxed out a more introspective dimension of the storyline, showing Banner struggling with family history and heartbreak. Themes Bill must have felt deeply. Viewers responded in kind, and The Incredible Hulk became a beloved staple of late 70s and early 80s TV. Even as the show ended in 1982, Bill wasn't done with the Green Goliath. Over the next few years, he starred in and directed 3 Hulk TV movies: The Incredible Hulk Returns, 1988, which introduced Thor; The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, 1989, featuring Daredevil; and The Death of the Incredible Hulk, 1990, which offered a poignant conclusion to Banner's long journey. Bill's attention to crossover elements in these movies was almost a prelude to the shared universes we see today. He skillfully balanced the superhero team-up novelty with Banner's emotional weight, forging a template that comic book adaptations would refine decades later. Beyond the Hulk, Bill didn't abandon other creative avenues. He directed episodes of the offbeat comedy Sledgehammer, 1987, and dabbled in hosting and producing shows like Against the Odds, 1982, and True Confessions, 1986 to 1987. These jobs might not have earned him as much acclaim as his iconic roles, but they reflected his restless drive to explore all corners of the entertainment world. As for his personal life, he tried to find happiness again, marrying Laura Jane Michaels in 1991. That relationship, too, ended in divorce in 1992. But Bill's capacity to hope and move forward never seemed to diminish. He married Judith Cliban, widow of the cartoonist B. Cliban, in October 1993. Tragically, Bill was already very ill, and he would pass away just a few weeks into their marriage. The reason? Prostate cancer, diagnosed in 1991. Even when faced with this formidable opponent, Bill's resilience shone through. He was determined not to let a terminal illness stop him from working. He underwent surgery and radiation therapy, earning a brief remission by late 1991, and promptly went back to directing. He guest starred on Diagnosis Murder, directed episodes of Blossom, and continued scheduling new projects. By early 1992, though, his PSA levels indicated the cancer was returning. Undeterred, Bill began experimental serum treatments at UCLA. For a short while, it seemed promising. His PSA levels dropped, providing him a glimmer of hope. Yet by mid-1993, it was clear the cancer had spread aggressively, invading his liver and bones. Through intense pain, weight loss, and exhaustion, Bill still showed up for work on Blossom, often directing while lying on a couch. Cast members recall him showing up in pajamas, pale and gaunt, but still offering gentle guidance and positivity. It was as if Bill needed to keep working, keep telling stories, right up until the very end. In November 1993, that end arrived. On November 15th, he directed his final episode of Blossom, A Mind with a Heart of Its Own. Right after calling cut on the final scene, he collapsed, too weak to continue. The hospital had little more to offer him, but Bill insisted on returning home in Century City to spend his last days with Judith. He slipped into a coma on November 20th and passed away the following afternoon, November 21st, 1993, at the age of 59. The official cause was respiratory failure stemming from prostate cancer complications. It was a somber finale for a man who had worked tirelessly and endured so much loss, all while maintaining a public persona that radiated warmth and humility. For those who knew him or grew up watching him, The pain of his departure was sharp. Lou Ferrigno mourned publicly, recalling how Bill had become more than just a co-star. He was a friend, a mentor. Brandon Cruz, who had once been the wide-eyed child on the courtship of Eddie's father, openly acknowledged how Bill's fatherly role was not just an on-screen act. Ray Walston, that alien Martian from Bill's earliest breakout role, also paid tribute, reminiscing about all those chess matches and how Bill always carried himself with a certain understated grace. The cast of Blossom aired a small tribute, reminding viewers just how much Bill had contributed to the show's behind-the-scenes spirit. In the years following his passing, Bill Bixby's legacy didn't fade. If anything, it became more substantial. The 2011 dedication of a Hollywood Walk of Fame star near Universal Studios was a fitting homage to a man whose presence at that studio was practically synonymous with the Incredible Hulk. Kids who discovered reruns of My Favorite Martian or The Courtship of Eddie's Father found themselves charmed by Bill's ease in front of the camera. Meanwhile, superhero enthusiasts revisiting old Hulk episodes recognized that Bill's banner was the origin of a more nuanced approach to the comic book scientist trope, an approach that would influence actors like Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo in later adaptations of the character. Not surprisingly, Bill's estate at the time of his death was estimated at somewhere between $10 and $15 million. It was a testament to a lifetime of steady work in Hollywood, from comedic sitcoms to dramatic series, from hosting jobs to directorial stints. Portions of that estate went to scholarships and charitable causes, underscoring a desire to give back, a desire that Bill had displayed privately for years. Though he never wore it on his sleeve, he was known around town for quiet acts of generosity like supporting up-and-coming actors or mentoring a friend's child who showed some interest in performing. His philanthropic bent in death was simply an extension of the generosity he'd shown in life. And what about the devoted fans who still revere him today? They keep him alive in many ways, whether by streaming old shows and discussing them on social media or by attending fan conventions where the Incredible Hulk is still a hot topic. People post tribute videos that highlight his comedic moments on My Favorite Martian alongside emotional scenes from the Incredible Hulk, weaving them together to demonstrate the scope of his talents. The continuing wave of superhero movies and TV shows inevitably leads fans to reflect on Bill's portrayal of Banner. Mark Ruffalo himself once stated that seeing Bill Bixby's Hulk series as a kid gave him his first sense of empathy for the hero trapped inside a monster archetype. Bill's approach set a gold standard for layering real human pathos over extraordinary circumstances, reminding us that at the core of any superhero story is the fragile humanity that makes us care in the first place. In pop culture history, it's common for certain figures to fade once their shows go off the air. But Bill Bixby's presence remained surprisingly strong, partly because he was so active in all corners of the medium. He wasn't pigeonholed into a single genre. He gracefully crossed between comedy, drama, family-friendly sitcoms, and even detective illusions. He wore the hats of actor, director, and sometimes host, leaving behind not just a treasure trove of performances, but a legacy of mentorship. Younger actors who worked with him talk about how he set the mood on set, always professional, rarely rattled, quietly funny in a way that felt inviting rather than showy. Then there's the intangible element of Bill's particular warmth. He exuded a trustworthiness that made him perfect as the kind of father, friend, or tragic anti-hero audiences could root for. His life certainly wasn't sunshine and roses. He endured a painful divorce, personal tragedies, and a relentless terminal illness. But the way he carried himself offered a model of resilience. Perhaps that's why fans still talk about him with such affection, as though he were a family member who used to pop by once a week in the living room. Indeed, for many families who grew up watching the courtship of Eddie's father or My Favorite Martian, Bill Bixby's face was as familiar as a relative's. Even now, people might catch a rerun, see that friendly expression, and feel a comforting nostalgia that's hard to replicate with modern television styles. But Bill's story also has universal lessons. No matter where you start, whether in a broken family dynamic or driftless early adulthood, persistence can carve out a place in the world for your dreams. He showed that you could pivot from modeling in Detroit to comedic roles in Hollywood, from comedic roles to intense drama, and from intense drama to a directorial career. Even when tragedy strikes or illness hits or doors slam shut, there's often another path forward if you have the determination to walk it. Bill's entire life underscores the notion that success can involve multiple transformations, not unlike the mild-mannered Banner morphing into the Hulk, except in Bill's case, each transformation was an evolution of his craft. As the years pass, the final note of Bill Bixby's life continues to resonate, not as a sorrowful coda, but as a reminder that a true performer's spirit never really disappears. It lives on in reruns, in interviews, in heartfelt tributes. He gave us a father in the courtship of Eddie's father, a comedic partner in My Favorite Martian, a tragic hero in The Incredible Hulk, a conjuring detective in The Magician, and a quietly skillful hand behind the camera in numerous directorial efforts. He faced the worst heartbreak any parent can imagine, outlived 2 marriages, battled a relentless illness, yet never lost that essential Bill Bixby warmth. It's no wonder his memory endures, crossing generation gaps as new fans discover his work and realize with pleasant surprise that they've found an actor who still feels relevant and relatable. So the next time you hear that lonely piano theme from The Incredible Hulk, or remember the peppy opening of The Courtship of Eddie's Father, think about Bill. Think about the courage it took to keep performing while his world seemed to crumble around him. Think about the joy he must have felt in front of the camera, that electric spark he brought to every role, comedic or tragic. Think about a man who started in the Bay Area, wandered through odd jobs, found a taste of success modeling for Chrysler, and then soared into the hearts of millions through the magic of television. That's Bill Bixby's story, a journey through heartbreak and triumph, laughter and tears, from a little boy near Golden Gate Park to a beloved icon of classic TV. And in that story, we find a legacy that endures, proof that even in an era of fleeting fame, genuine talent, authenticity, and kindness can leave a mark strong enough to last for generations.